Welcome back to the Venari podcast. I'm Kandola, and I'm joined for this episode by Christoph Domke. Christoph is a leader within the mobility space and a former global director for clean and smart mobility with a few different consulting firms, including the likes of FTI and KPMG. Christoph, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Gav. Pleasure.
It's great to have you on. And we're actually doing a two-part series. So in part one of the two-part series, we're going to be gaining an insight into the world of autonomous trucks. You know, what they are, some of the key benefits associated with them, and also some of the roadblocks autonomous vehicles face. So Christoph, to kick us off, do you mind giving us an overview of exactly what autonomous trucks are?
Yeah, I think autonomous trucks, most people call it self-driving trucks, and they are commercial vehicles that use a lot of artificial intelligence, so automate services, and that includes yard operations, that includes local deliveries, long-haul deliveries. I think important to know is if you talk about autonomous trucks, they require no human driver, at least in the advanced stages, very similar to self-driving cars. They use a lot of long-range, high-resolution sensors, a range of deep neural networks, a lot of high-performance, energy-efficient technologies, and they all have and they all result in a lot of benefits, actually. So you make the entire logistics process much more efficient, you increase safety, but overall, you can say, looking at all of this, autonomous trucks will likely revolutionize logistics over the next couple of years. And that maybe also explains why you have such an interest in this sector coming from traditional OEMs, suppliers, startups, insurance firms, financial services, consumer goods firms. So a massive amount of interest. So great potential for the sector going forward.
Definitely. You highlighted a few of the key benefits there in regards to safety. I believe in terms of 24/7 operations as well, becoming something that is possible moving forward. But what are some of the roadblocks that the autonomous trucks still face?
I think some of the roadblocks, I think you have to go back and maybe from a starting point. So if you think about the technology, imagine you're building a very advanced, forward-looking autonomous vehicle platform. That's already very difficult. On top of that, you integrate it into a heavy truck, so a very big vehicle that we see on the road. It makes it even more challenging. And on top of that, you want to deploy this vehicle with the technology in a commercially viable way. And I think these are really challenges for an industry. If you look at specific pain points in the industry, of course, we have societal acceptance. So are we comfortable seeing autonomous heavy trucks on the road with no driver in there? A lot of people would still say no, probably to take some time to get used to it. We have the regulatory environment, particularly when it comes to commercializing operations. So legal issues surrounding insurance and legal liability for accidents is one one. But also when it comes to testing and operating autonomous vehicles. So there's quite a patchwork of state-by-state regulations. If you look in the US, some advanced states there, California, Arkansas, and Oklahoma is great, but the rest has none or is lagging really regulation. So it's not good for the industry. Technology in itself, also an issue. If you look at safety and cybersecurity, who is responsible in case of an accident? Trucks have the disadvantage. They need to see further ahead than cars, particularly when it comes to stopping distance. So it's another obstacle. What happens in adverse weather conditions? So if it's snowing or raining, how does the technology work there? Additional obstacles. And of course, if you all take that together, particularly on the technology front, results in significantly higher upfront costs. And in an industry where it's all about costs, if you have to pay more for technology or a truck with the technology, a lot of people look at it in not a favorable way. So it makes it very difficult. And maybe a last and final point, and this is quite a sensitive one, is truckers' jobs. So you take the trucker or the driver out of the equation. There's a lot of potential drivers or people that operate in the industry in Europe, but also in the US, they would lose their jobs. And it's not only drivers, also people that work at truck stops. So I think this is a sensitive issue and it needs to be dealt with in a very efficient manner, and also need to be looked at quite carefully because there's opportunity, but also you don't want to make people redundant. So these are some obstacles definitely that the industry has to address.
Definitely. Well, we always see the perception that, you know, autonomous trucks coming in will take individuals' jobs. I think the American Trucking Association back in October last year mentioned actually we were 80,000 drivers needed on the roads due to these boom in e-commerce. So actually, there's quite a wide gap that we need to kind of bridge at this point.
Absolutely. And I think this is something where you also see the advantages of the technology coming in. tackle driver shortages. You mentioned the number for the US. I think we have numerous markets around the world that suffer driver shortages. So those vehicles come in quite handy if you have autonomous trucks on our roads. You have the significant advantage that you have lower costs per mile. So if you look at the expenses for fleet operators or individual drivers, it's mostly fuel consumption and then the driver salary in itself. So this technology, autonomous trucks, can tackle both, get rid of driver salary, also increase the fuel consumption or make fuel consumption much better. So you tackle the two most important components in the equation, so which is very good. It decreases carbon footprint and emissions, another big advantage. Shorter driving time and higher efficiency because you have an artificial system driving instead of a driver who can make mistakes. You have fewer driving restrictions. If you're thinking about the US market or European market, you have restrictive working hours for drivers. They need to have breaks. An autonomous system can drive around the clock, more or less, until the point when it needs to be maintained, needs to be recharged or refueled, depending on which alternative powertrain solution it has on board. So another big advantage. And also, you have safer operations, less accidents. Because if you think about heavy trucks, most of heavy trucks accidents are actually caused by driver fatigue, by driver errors, a lot of recklessness on the roads, and also distractions. So a lot of benefits here that we can tackle with this technology too.
Definitely. In regards to the infrastructure required, what are the limitations and some of the costs involved there?
I think if you look at infrastructure investment, I think depending on particular where this autonomous technology is seated, I think when you look at particularly long road deliveries, I think you probably need to invest in infrastructure, particularly when it comes to facilities or the depots. So you need to install certain AV infrastructure around this place, which means also if you look at facility, you will have major costs that could involve rent, unless the public sector owns the structure. You could have labor costs involved. You could have also, as a side effect, additional charging or refueling structure that needs to be involved, depending on whether the truck is running on battery electric or hydrogen fuel or power going forward. So these are some of the considerations that I think a lot of companies have to take into account when moving this technology forward.
Perfect. And in your opinion, when do we expect to see autonomous trucks probably on more of a widespread scale on our roads?
I think this is a very, very good question. I think what has happened, we see in the industry is over the last couple of years that a lot of the key players in the market have announced projected dates for launching the technology, for launching trucks with the technology, and they had to postpone those dates. And I've been mentioning for a couple of years that a lot of these dates are very ambitious and probably not realistic, because I think what you want to do, particularly operating heavy truck vehicles, is rigorous testing. You only want to release the technology when it's safe. So when is that the case? And that really depends on, when we talk about heavy trucks, particularly which level of automation we're talking about. So we have different levels in the industry that you talk about, between level 0 and level 5, which is absolutely full automation. So when we talk about next steps going forward, level 4, which does not require human interaction in most circumstances, but a driver still has to have the option to manually override this. I think it's probably 2024, 2025. Until then, the market will probably remain in a learning phase. And it's probably a character of early deployment. I think true level 5, fully automated vehicles, where the vehicle is capable of performing all driving functions under any conditions, that will take a long time. I think it's probably something we're looking into over the next decade to realize. So definitely some way to go. But overall, going forward, I think particularly when we talk about the most advanced levels of automation, I think one critical point that I always emphasize is it needs a joint effort. It needs to incorporate multiple stakeholders. No company can do it alone. So OEMs, startups, the government, non-automotive sectors, they all have to come together to make this work. But if you take that all into account, if you look at the use cases, if you look at the benefits that truck can do, if you look at the operational situation, you definitely have to say that overall trucks have moved past cars on the road to autonomy.
Really appreciate the insight, Christoph. And in part 2, we're going to be comparing electric versus hydrogen fuel cell trucks in the ongoing battle to replace diesel-powered Class 8. So looking forward to that discussion.
Yeah, looking forward to that.